sure whether do you hear me or it's not working. Is it okay? No. No. Hello. Oh, there. Okay. Thank you for joining us today. This is the Economic Gender Gaps Trade and Economic Growth panel organized by CPEC. My name is Martin Rapetti. I'm the director of the program on economic development at CPEC. I'm also the head of the policy and research team at the T20 Argentina. And also I'm a professor at the University of Buenos Aires. It's really a great honor for us to having this panel. We have a very lively and engaging panel with very important people on the issue of gender equality and economic empowerment of women. Let me introduce our four speakers. Carolina Castro, unfortunately, could not make it for personal issues. So we have, I will introduce in the sequence, we have Susana Balbo, who is the co-chair of the W20 Argentina. She's also the owner of Susana Balbo Wines. And also she's a congresswoman at the Argentine National Congress. We have Mona Küppers. Mona Küppers is a market expert and works at the Institute for Sports Science of the University of Duisburg, Essen. She was the former co-chair of the W20 Germany. She also is a member of the National Council of German Women Organization. And I think I saw also in your bio something that it was very shocking to me. You are the first woman to be appointed at the board of the German Sailing Association. The first one in 127 years. So something was really, really astonishing for me. Then we have Lorena Triaca. Lorena is the Executive External Affairs Director at the Argentine Investment and Trade Promotion Agency. She's in charge of the initiative called Mujeres Exportadoras, which is, the translation would be female exporters. And she's also going to tell us about a new initiative, which is She Trades, which is linked to the ICT center. And finally, we have the honor to having here Irene Natividad. Irene is a well-known leader of the women rights movement in the United States. She's the president of the Global Summit of Women, usually known as the Davos for Women. Is that correct? And also she's a chair of the Corporate Women Directors International. So this is for us a real honor to have such a high-level speakers for this panel. This is how we are going to organize the session. I will give a very short introduction based on a work that we're doing at CPEC, which is basically writing a business case for the economic returns of closing gender gaps. We are doing this work with Gala Diaz-Langu, my colleague at the social protection program at the CPEC, and also is part of an effort that we are doing in CPEC, T20, and W20. And so after I present this very briefly, these results, I will then start the conversation with our speakers, which is the most value that we can offer today, which are our presenters. So, of course, the conversation, I will shoot a question to one of you, but of course you can intervene whenever you want. I know. Okay, it's a lively conversation among all of us. So feel free to interrupt me whenever you want and make comments after our presenters. So I'll try to. I'll get a neck problem, I guess. This is not working. Oh, great. This is, yeah. I would say it's not the most comfortable set, but we'll do our best. So let me just start by saying something that we all know, but we can present some numbers on this, that there are significant economic gender gaps both at the national level and globally. Here we present a very well-known set of information built by the World Economic Forum. This is the Global Gender Gap Index, which says that women face overall a gap about 32% compared to men. This is decomposed in 5 and 4 sub-items. We have economic participation and opportunity, where women have face a gap of about 40% compared to men. In terms of educational attainment and health, there are very minor gaps. But if we look at political empowerment, we see that women, on average, get to participate less than a quarter than men. These are very substantial gaps. And something that is not something that is worrisome is not only this picture, but also the motion at which these gaps are moving, are closing very slowly. According to the World Economic Forum, closing the economic gaps would take 217 years. So it's a lot of times unless we do something quicker. If we look at the biggest companies in the world, we see that, for instance, 60% of these companies have no females on the managing boards. 50% have no top executive, and only 5%, or even less than 5%, have a CEO that is a woman. So this is, of course, a clear representation of the gaps. This figure comes from a survey made by Mercer. Here, if you look at the last part over there, you see that something that we already know, that more than half, about 60% of the workforce is male, is composed by men. Only less than 40 are women. But something that is also very striking is that if you look at the first bar, you see that in terms of support staff, these positions are basically composed by women, which are more than 50%. But if we look at the other end and see the executive positions, we see that only 19% are women and the rest are men. So this is a clear, here we see two things: horizontal segregation and also glass ceilings. We can go on with data. I won't show it here. We have a very short report that is around somewhere here. Katerina over there has them. If you want to read the report, you can ask her. But so let me move quickly to why closing gender gaps is not only desirable in terms of fairness, which is, I would say, the most important argument why we should close gender gaps, but also because it's a good economic business to close gender gaps. There are, of course, 3 clear, obvious reasons why. The first one is that we have underutilized talent. There are from 10 men who participate in the labor force, only 6 women participate in the labor force. So adding the extra 4 women that are not part of the labor force will obviously increase the potential GDP per capita. So there we have a tremendous potential gain, economic gain from closing gaps. A second obvious reason is that we are underinvesting in talent. We know that there are no different in terms of talent when people are born. Women and men are essentially the same in terms of talent. But as we discriminate women in the education process, we are underinvesting in their talent. Therefore, there is a lot of room to gain human capital by closing these asymmetries. And the third obvious reason is that we can improve in terms of efficiency. Since we are discriminating women in the labor market, we have less talented men occupying positions that could be being occupied by women. If you want an example, you can see that you can have a Gala instead of me here doing a better job than me, and it would be a better panel. Gala is not here, not because I'm discriminating her, but because we thought when we planned this panel that it would be better to have a more balanced panel in terms of gender. But in terms of efficiency, it would have been much better having Gala here instead of me. Yes, we can change now. So of course, the literature offers a lot of other mechanisms through which closing gender gaps would improve economic welfare. But I think these 3 are enough to discuss here. And let me now go very briefly in terms of evidence of how having a more balanced labor force, more gender diversity could improve economic welfare. There are lots of studies showing that in terms of many different financial variables, firms that have a more balanced composition of the labor force, more diversity in terms of gender, they perform much better. Let me, to go quickly, show this very eloquent graph. The gray line shows the stock performance of firms that big firms that have produced more than $10 billion a year, and you see that so the gray line is the stock performance of firms that have a more diverse composition in terms of gender. So the gray line has above average women on managerial position, and the blue line has the below average participation of women. You see a clear difference between them in terms of stock market performance. Just to give you a flavor, the gap at the end of this series is 36%. So besides being good for fairness, it's a good investment to invest in companies where there is more women on managerial positions. So I just gave you a good financial tip. There is also a lot of evidence showing that the performance in terms of productivity is much better in firms that have a more balanced composition in terms of gender. Of course, this is more at the micro level, but at the macro level, you will also observe that countries that have less inequality in terms of gender do better. For instance, this graph shows a scatter plot of countries. In the vertical axis, you have the Human Development Index, and in the horizontal axis, you have an index of gender inequality. So you see a clear correlation, negative correlation, between human development and gender inequality. So improving reducing gender inequality should improve human development. The same appears to happen in terms of economic growth. In the vertical axis, you have the rate of economic growth, GDP growth, between, I think, I cannot see it from here, I think it's 1985 to 2015. And again, in the horizontal axis, you have the gender inequality index. Again, if you reduce gender inequality, you reap more economic growth. And just to wrap up, this is the result of a study by the International Labour Organization. This study estimates if countries manage to achieve the 25 by 25 initiative by the G20, developing countries would increase their GDP by 2%. 4.8 increase in GDP would happen for emerging markets, and 2.6 increase in GDP for developed countries. You also have more employment growth. You also have more a higher labor force. So in terms of economic returns, closing economic gender gaps is good. Let me now shift to the conversation and to have an insight. I really need to have it here because I want to look at you. So let me turn to Susana. Susana, you've been a very successful business person. You are the first ethnologist in Argentina, so I think you can tell us from the business person perspective, is it a good business, a good deal to have a more diverse panel of in terms of gender? Is it good to hire women in terms of profitability, productivity? What's your opinion on this?
Yes, of course. Thank you very much for the question. When I started, it was very difficult because it was 34 years ago. So gender, it wasn't in people's minds. So it was very hard because it was everything about to have talent and to show the talent and to double work than the men's. If men were working 6 hours, 7 hours in the winery, I was working 11. However, that is the past. Today in my company, I have in the board 50% women, 50% men. In the labor force in the company is more than 50% women because we are an agricultural roots company, and women are much more detail-driven. In a company where you have very high added value product like mine, you need these skills. So we have men in the work that we don't need skills for details or to have the eyes that women have. And we are able to have this quantity of women because we have a policy for them to have more freedom if they have child. We have during the harvest time that we know we work 24 hours, 7 days a week. With, of course, the people don't work the 24 hours. We have 3 turns, 8 hours each. But the people who has the night turn, we have people to look after the kids. So we have all the policies in order to have the table in the same level for both women's and men's. We don't have any gap in salary. We respect talent, And for us, we do monthly evaluation, skills evaluation, development evaluation, productivity, new propositions, because we are a company, we really appreciate the creativeness. Women are much more creative than men, and mostly the most important change and the most important propositions in that way comes from women in our team. Even the people that works in the more basic work, and this is great, absolutely great.
Hi. Something that I think it's interesting is, did you follow this balanced approach because you were imitating someone else, or you self-discovered that this was good for your own company?
No, none of them. Is another answer. For me, it was so difficult to get a job. I should move 1,500 kilometers from my home, my town, to have a job. So when I'm looking for an employee, I'm trying to get women first. And if I cannot get women, men can feel they are discriminated. But if I cannot get women, I hire men. So my policy is try to have more women in my team, because really the productivity is more, the creativeness is more. They are very tempted not to bring over to the table problems. They are tempted to bring to the table solutions. So they bring the problem, but they bring the solution in the meantime. And this is because it's my manner to manage the company. And usually I told them, when something that is written in the walls in my company, one of them is there is no mistake when the mistake is declared, because we can solve, especially talking about wines, because one mistake can ruin thousands of liters of wine. So it's very important they declare if they commit some mistake. So there is not punishment. It's just everybody as a team trying to solve the problem. So people is not afraid to lose the job, because we are human beings. We commit mistakes. I commit a lot when I started. I ruined a lot of wines. So I really understand that. So there is some areas where women don't want to be. One of them is finance. My daughter is graduated in finance, and she decided to take over all marketing and the restaurants in the company, hospitality. But she said, Mom, finance is very hard, and I want to raise a family, so no way for me. Another problem in a company like mine is export managers, because we need to travel a lot. And in that moment, I cannot solve the problem for the mothers that are leaving kids. And I left my kids many times, being a very child, and you feel guilty all the time. So.
You gave me the opportunity to switch to Lorena. We're in a trade and investment symposium, and something that we observe is that women participate much less in international trade than men, probably linked to what Susana was mentioning. So what's your take on this current situation of women in trade, and also in terms of the initiative that you are pushing forward?
Okay. First, thank you for the question. First, I would like to add that I think that women are, I don't know whether are more creative, but we are more resourceful. what we do is challenge ourselves in what leads that to the challenges in jobs and at work and at home and that we have. And we try to build this network and of the resources that we do have, and other people helping and other people in different situations and jobs, doing this network for women to promote themselves and get eager on what they do. I think that it's one of the characteristics that women have, and these spaces and these networks of building, either for trade or for many organizations that are working in that sense, are understanding what the needs of women are. Because when I see all of the data, I think that we have to move to the next steps, that's understanding why are the causes that lead to these numbers, what is the challenge, and get men involved in that discussion. If we don't get men and see what are we challenging them in women's participation in all of this, in this scenario. So I think it's one of the things that we have to address. And regarding trade, I think there's an enormous opportunity because as numbers show, and as Susana, as example, has said, there's an opportunity in the empowerment of women involving in trade and how it would lead to better results for the countries, for the general and the global numbers in all. So from our side, from the agency, we understood that we had to, and this call to action that Women 20 is doing, that ITC is doing, it's try to get an initiative, a concrete initiative in how we could do and support women coming into trade. So we started thinking, and I must confess that the initiative is because we saw it in other organizations that had already been done. So the ITC and the She Trades Global initial was a bit of the scope that gave us in what our mandate is at the agency in promoting trade and attracting investment to our country. And there was this program with this lines of work, which we would adhere to, starting with building disaggregated data to know what the real status in Argentina is, and that's the help of a lot of organizations that are working in that sense, because we don't have a bottom line where to start from. We don't know who we have to address. So building data is important, analyzing the different markets in which with Argentina it's able, and started what the strategic countries in which the markets we should undergo, enact for policies regarding the participation of women in trade. The very important one is regarding financing, but all of small and medium companies in Argentina and the companies in Argentina have that challenge. So how do we see with a gender perspective what the difficulties for women in getting the financials is, and how can we help them? How can we let them know and spread the word or everything that it's done, not only on the government side, from the private banks and international organizations in putting their financial opportunities for them. So we, our mandate is getting the PYMEs, the small and medium enterprises, and building them into export PYMEs. So how do we address? We identify them. We do a diagnosis of in which state their company is. Will they be able to export? Have they already exported and they need to boost their numbers? Is there a specific market which they should address? So we work together with them in building this path of being an exporter, where the promotion is at the latest side of all of this path. Because if we get someone into a fair abroad and they don't have the possibility of addressing the non-tariff measures because they're not able to regulatory basis or get the seals in their products, then we're getting them backwards. So it's like moving along with the path. And I think that it's like a showing it what women, the path of women is in the real life. We walk together with others in developing ourselves. We challenge ourselves. And I think when a woman can get their products, and I might say the challenge that Susana might have when she saw her wine, first one in a wine cellar, in a cellar at a table in another country. Exporting, it's like getting from here to there, traveling abroad, crossing the sea, crossing the border. So I think it's a good image of what women will do and are doing. But I honestly think we need to have the conversation with men.
We will go there soon. Something that we are observing is that the international trade is being facilitated by new technologies. This is something that the W20 during the German presidency has worked a lot on. I think one of the, correct me if I'm wrong, Mona, but I think one of the key messages from the W20 Germany, is that digitalization creates new opportunities for women to be integrated in both in the international trade system, but also in the labor force, in the labor markets. So, could you please elaborate on this, on your work on this?
Yes, of course. Thank you very much, Martin. But first of all, I like to emphasize that I'm no economist or policy expert of the digital economy. As you said, I'm the president of an association which represents the biggest women's lobby in Germany, and I was honored to chair this year's German Women's 20 dialogue under the German G20 presidency. So drawing from my experience from both national and international policy discussion, I can elaborate first why we consider gender equality in the digital economy so important, and second, what exactly we mean when we advocate the digital inclusion of women. As you have already said, we can all agree that gender equality is not only a pressing moral and social issue, but also a critical economic challenge. If women who account, that's remarkable, who account for half the world's working age population do not achieve their full economic potential, the global economy will suffer. And in 2015, the McKinsey Global Institute published a report which found that no less than $12 trillion could be added to the global GDP by 2025 by advancing women's equality. And this is great. But the crucial question, what we need, question what we need to discuss is how exactly do we advance women's equality and what are the tools which help us reaching the pressing goal. And this is where the digital transformation plays a crucial role. And under the German presidency, Women 20 commissioned a study on the effects of digitalization on gender equality in the G20 economies. And in this study, we find that we can only enable the full participation of women in labor markets, in entrepreneurial and financial activities, if we strengthen the digital inclusion of women and use digitalization as a tool to advance women's equality. In other words, to have a realistic shot at reaching these additional $12 trillion to the global GDP, we must use the digital transformation for the benefit of gender equality. But what exactly do we mean by the digital gender divide and digital inclusion? That's the question we have had all the year during the W20's presidency. And I say we must recognize that the digital transformation cannot be seen as an independent policy field, but rather as a very complex cross-thematic issue. And that is why when we demand G20 leaders to promote digital inclusion, we talk about multiple aspects. First, digital inclusion is about improving digital literacy. Second, digital inclusion means to enable sufficient connectivity and access to the internet. Third, digital inclusion also includes that digital services have to be made accessible. And finally, cyber harassment is a major topic. Women in particular are targets of cyber harassment and violence across a range of online platforms. And this leads to mistrust and retreat from the web. And to conclude, we can only achieve the economic gains which are promised by digitalization if we ensure that the benefits of the digital transformation are equally distributed between men and women. I think that's enough for the first answer. Go on.
Thank you, Mona. You opened the door of policy, and I want to continue with you, Irene. I read an interview of yours, which I really liked, and you describe yourself as a quota girl, and I think it's a very interesting policy for the private sector, implementing quotas. Could you, I mean, in your experience, could you tell us more about why you think you need to force demand for women workers in the labor market through quotas? Sure.
You ask me why? Because we waited long enough. Okay. Recently, there's been a great deal of momentum on the issue of increasing the numbers of women on corporate boards. And the question is, why does it matter? Well, Martin actually gave what's called the business case for women's equity in the marketplace. The more women there are on boards or in senior leadership, the better is the financial performance of a company. That's called the business case. There are now 73 studies that show the exact same thing. So at this point, I say, no more studies, okay? We get it, but others don't. The ministers should be looking at the business case. Remember also that it's a correlation, it's not causality. There's not a direct link. But because there are 73 studies showing the same results, surely it must be real. So I put this in here because I wanted you to see how bad it really looks. So we looked at the 200 largest companies in the world. And why the 200 largest? They're based in 26 countries. They're the pace setters. So they average 17.8% women directors in the 200 largest companies. And you go, why is that? Because we are not yet in charge. So what do I press here?
The green one.
The green one?
No? No.
No, but I mean, what do I press here? I'm techno-bubble. Oh, okay. I have to point here. You know, okay, you know what? I'm going to stand. Okay. I belong to the minority of the short, so I can't do this. All right. So I wanted to show you a regional comparison. And as you will see, Northern Europe, which are the Nordics, you know, Sweden, Denmark, you know, Iceland, Finland, are doing much better at 35.6%. And then if you look at Western Europe, it averages 23.6%, although some countries do much, much better than that. My country, the United States, doesn't do well. We're at 20%. Canada pushes us up a little bit more. But look where Latin America is, 7.4%, near the end, close to the Middle East. Now, we then looked at what companies are doing better than others. So here's the top 5. And when we first started looking at the top 10 in 2004, it was dominated by US companies. That is no longer the case. And as you will see here, look, the first 4 companies are French. The number 1 company in the world with the highest percentage of women on boards is a French oil company called Engie, 52.9%. It's a female-dominated board, and the CEO is a woman, Isabelle Cochet. Their competitor is Total. Total is much bigger. They don't want to be behind Engie, so they're now at 50%. So what happens is competition comes in, all right? So as you will see, more French companies. You've got a car company in Peugeot, an insurance company, banks, 2 banks, Société Générale, BNP Paribas. If you look at the rest of the top 10, again, more French companies and so on. we only have 4 U.S. companies making it to the top 10. And so the question is, why is that? Why are French companies, German companies, look, even Italy, my husband is Italian, Assicurazione Generali, an insurance company in Italy for the first time made it to the top 10. So the question is why? Because with the exception of the US and Switzerland, which is going in that direction, all of those countries have quotas. So which countries? There are now 23 countries with quotas for women on boards. In 2004, when we began, there weren't this many, but there's something that's happening, and it's crossing borders. Norway, even though Israel started earlier, Norway was the one who was the propellant. They said in 2003, they had a target of 40% of board seats must be held by women, and it must be in place within a 2-year period. Companies that didn't comply would be dissolved. Well, no company was dissolved. A few did delist because it's for listed companies, but they're now at 40% women on boards. And then other European countries started to follow. The latest is Portugal at the bottom. Look at Malaysia in the middle. It is the only country in the Asia-Pacific region with what we call a soft target. The Prime Minister, it wasn't by law, the Prime Minister announced it. 30% of board seats must be held by women in all companies. And then take a look at the second tier here. The second row is for state-owned companies, and those are big companies, you know, airlines, telecom, you know, railroads. And look here, UAE, United Arab Emirates. When somebody says, you know, that's such a hard thing to do, I said, look, United Arab Emirates said at least 1 seat must be given to a woman in state-owned companies. The same in India, at least 1 seat, okay? That's a different type of quota. So the question is, does it work? And I'm giving this chart. It may be hard to look in the back. When Norway passed this in 2003, they only had 6.8% women on boards. Look what happened when they reached that target at 42%. That was an increase of 35.2. Take a look at France. When they passed the quota law in 2010, they were at 10% women board directors. They're now at 41.6, surpassing the target of 40%. Take a look at Italy again, 5% in the beginning, 27% increase at the end. So not everybody loves quotas. Quota is a dirty word. A lot of women say to me, I don't want to be appointed because of a quota. I want to be appointed because of my skills. I tell them, get over it. Quotas are just a door, and we have to push it open because it has a deadline. It's not forever. So for the countries that don't like quotas, there's another strategy, which is to put gender equity, gender equality into the corporate governance code of their countries. There were only 4 before. Now look, whether to fight quotas or to parallel quotas, there are now all these countries. There are African countries, Asian countries doing this. The best ones, Australia. Australia's corporate governance code is in the stock exchange. So the Australian Stock Exchange said that gender diversity is now a listing requirement, which means all the member companies had to report percentage of women on boards, percentage of women in senior management, and in your workforce. And most important, what are you going to do to change it? They also created something called the Male Champions of Change, which are male CEOs who said, we will be the public voice for gender equity in corporate leadership. In Finland, the corporate governance code is housed by the Chamber of Commerce, and they set a target of 30% for their members. In the UK, they changed the corporate governance code 3 times, so it now parallels Australia. Does it work? Look in Finland. 14% when they started their target, they're now at 33%. They surpassed their 30% target. In Australia, they began at 8.6, they're now at 27.4%. And then in the UK, their target was 25%. They have surpassed it. They're at 27. They've set a new target of 37%. So You cannot make happen what you can't measure, okay? So whether it's a target or a quota, you need a number. So for those that have quotas, what makes a good quota law? You need sanctions. There needs to be punishment for those companies that don't comply. You have to have a deadline. You can't just say at least one woman. Without a deadline, nobody feels compelled. Government must make sure that companies are doing it. And corporations must accept that this is something that they need to do. In all the countries where the numbers have moved upwards, the media covered it extensively. And lastly, you need political will. Change doesn't happen without pressure. And a quota law creates that pressure. There's always been a supply of women who are equipped to be on corporate boards. What quotas do is force a demand, okay? So nobody ever gave away power. So what we have to do is to grab it for ourselves. That's it.
Thank you, Irene. Susana. I think Susana wants to say something.
Yes. Irene's words are very encouraging, especially for me as a congresswoman, because we have a good point of start. We are 42% in the Congress, so we are able to think about this kind of law. But I wanted to point it something important. Why is so important the business case for Argentina? Argentina women that are CEOs or president of the company only reach this position if they are member of the family founder. And if the family founder have the protocol of the family that allow that, because there is a lot of company that don't allow the women reach the higher position. So the men's position, for not talking about machismo or going to the stereotypes, wars all over the world, sometimes block the access to the women to the highest positions. So I encourage women to settle their own companies, as I did. Because it happened to me in my family. My parents decided my brother should manage the company. 6 months later, I realized I cannot work with him, because we are in the opposite. I left and I started my own company. Okay, it's not easy. It's a tough decision. You pass many troubles and very sad moments. It's not easy, I recognize. But I think when women has the decision, has the dream to have their own business, we can do that. So we need to encourage more women to do that. And to also talking about the export and the trade. There is, today with the technology, it's much easier to approach the market. When I started 20 years ago exporting, I needed to go to the market. I was spending 180 days in the market. And I realized I needed to teach other people how to build the price, to build how to approach in trade fairs, many things. But we are much more advanced right now, and technology allowed us to do much better. So we need to teach women how to do that. They need to learn, because we have 60% of the women that are university graduated, and only 40% works. So we are missing a lot of investments right now in education that we need to achieve to improve the quality of our country.
Thank you, Susana. I could stay 3 more hours, but we have only half an hour left, and I don't want to monopolize the questions. So I'll make a last question for all of you, and then I'll open the room for questions. This is something that we all, I think, agree that there is a huge cultural component on being a main obstacle for women in the economy. And Lorena point to something that I think is very important to bring men into the discussion. But there is something that reading Irene's interview that I think was very shocking to me, at least, is that you mentioned that, for instance, Hillary Clinton lost an election by the vote of white women that supported more the male candidate, Trump. And so I wonder whether it's only men who need to be brought to the conversation, or it's something that we have to discuss more deeper into the whole society. So this is my last question, and probably I will ask Mona and Susana to try to address this question in the frame of the W20, Germany and Argentina, but for Lorena and Irene, it's an open question. So whoever wants to start. Irene.
Okay. You know, I always say, you can't role model what you can't see. American women never saw a woman president. And so there is a doubt that perhaps she's not up to it. I agree with Susana. I want more women CEOs, and entrepreneurship is the key. Because especially in Latin America, where there are lots of family-owned companies, the key is to be the head of your own business. So whether it's my country or Latin America, I want women to be economically successful. I think entrepreneurship is the key, is the door to greater equality than waiting to be named a director or a CEO of a company. Export is very critical. And one of the things that we pushed for in the US during President Clinton's administration bill was women entrepreneurs trade mission. And I remembered when I went to the Department of Commerce, they said, well, why can't the women just join the men? I said, because they're not Coca-Cola, they are not Xerox, and that's who you design it for. The women's businesses are big, but they're not that big, and they need commonality among themselves. So they started the trade missions. It disappeared after Bush because it all depends on who's in charge. But it's a strategy that I would recommend, both for the W20 and also for Argentina. You know, I am so proud of women. They became entrepreneurs without funding, without role models like Susana over there, without even the support and the love of the people who say they respect us. But they moved into entrepreneurship in almost every country without anything, and now they're a force. We are almost, 40.4% of privately owned firms in the United States are owned and run by women. They generate $1.3 trillion worth of revenues, and they hire 9 million people. Until the Center for Women's Business Research, an NGO, came out with this data, women entrepreneurs weren't looked at seriously. You know, even corporate women will say, oh, you have a consulting business? Well, that's nice. It must keep you busy. But it's not something that they respect, you know. So then banks and governments started, paying attention to women entrepreneurs. So one of the things that I tell countries, count. Ask for sex disaggregated data. Without numbers, business and government will not listen. So count how many women-owned businesses there are. And even when you can't count, it won't count the women in the informal economy who have their own businesses, but nobody knows.
The challenge is those women entrepreneurs will build in companies that would have new employees, and those new employees are not only to be meant to be women, so it's going to be about women and men and diversity. So the challenge in the conversation that I said we should address with men is that balance. What are we challenging them in when you see those figures and when you see those numbers and when you see what quotas represent and the results in productivity, then I would like to understand and really sincerely understand What are we challenging you? What is your, because I was speaking with a colleague the other day, and now that since we have the program at the agency, everybody that has to, maybe there's a new person coming into the company, so they first come to me. I'm seeing a lot of women CVs. I'd asked for human resources to have CVs of women first. So it's like they come up to, because we are having, the program in the agency, they are showing they're trying to get more women involved. And then they justify, they don't choose them, why they are not choosing them. So the conversation has started, and when we sit at the board of directors and we discuss the things, not only because we do have the programs, but what are the challenges. We cannot have the program and not see what our gender gap is, what are the women that are working for us, their schedules and their flexibility, and what are their needs. So it's not only talking about the programs and the initiatives that we have, but getting involved with men in the discussion. And I think the other thing, when I started to learn more and read more of what's happening, is including and integrating the gender perspective into everything that we do. And I got struck by a case from a town in Sweden that they were analyzing that they have four more times expensive in health and in accidents that happened in the road in the season of the winter season than on cars. And so they saw that men were the ones driving by cars, because you know that men and cars have this match along, and women were the ones that were going through the sidewalks because they were taking their kids to school, and they usually work like in hospitals and in service places. And so they said that if the expenses were with women that had the accident because they slipped on the ice, why don't we first clean the sidewalks instead of the road, which the cost of the car crash and the expense of the car were less. So, and they lowered down the cost of the maintenance that they had of cleaning the streets and the sidewalks and diminished the health costs. So I think and this is only an example, but we should try to see and integrate a gender perspective in everything that we do, even in our own houses, in our places of work, and in our business.
Okay. I want to look back to the moment when we started to manage the process of W20 in Germany. And I will give a little but impressive example. When we started to organize the Women's 20 Summit, topics related to gender equality and women's empowerment were hard to find in the G20 discussions. And it's a little bit curious, but we looked for the word women in previous G20 communiques. But you will find that it was named only twice in 2014, 3 times in 2015, but 6 times in 2016. And the word gender didn't occur in any of the 3. And therefore, we decided that our mission has to be that we make the G20 realize that gender equality is a cross-cutting issue and a fundamental precondition to a prosperous and stable economy. And that is our work during the whole year to establish these thoughts and these minds to the G20. And I think you have a lot to do in the same work, in the same mission.
Yes, we do. However, in our country, there is a lot of law. There is a lot of policies to look after gender equality, look after women. However, nobody takes care about this law. So we need to highlight those laws and also to visualize what is the problem in our country. One of the main problems for us is the education, because women usually pick soft careers, and we need to encourage to have more entrepreneurship, encourage the STEM careers. I am engineer, so enologist is an engineering career. So you are able to have your entrepreneurship if you can find a work where you are able to settle a company. Another thing that is very important, and we are going to try to visualize through the W20, is the importance of all the transversal question, women or gender problem is in the B20, T20, Civil 20, youth, all of them. And something very important to highlight is when companies are managed for women, there is more embracing about transparency, the fight against the corruption. So this is very important. And we need to encourage more boards. And our duty in W20 through financial inclusion is to have more entrepreneurs having finance what needs. Labor inclusion, to have more women access in the boards and the decision position, plus all the women that are in the vulnerability situation to help them to access to health, to access to education and everything. And through digital inclusion is the tool to have all of this happening. So, and rural women needs all of them, all together. So we have a huge challenge for next year, but with Andrea, we have the conviction we can make something different.
The floor is open for questions. So over there, I have one, then you first, and then the man. I don't know. Yes, please go ahead.
Discrimination now.
No. I started with a woman.
Louder.
Ahí viene el micrófono.
It's coming.
Hola.
Over there.
No estamos tan apurados. Bueno, Cristina Manzano de Sociedad Rural Argentina, y voy a tomar un poco lo que decía Susana Balbo hablando de la mujer rural. Primero que estoy de acuerdo con ella, las leyes son como una letra muerta, ¿no? Habría que empezar a implementar las leyes. La pregunta es un poco al panel, ¿no? Las microfinanzas, hablando de las mujeres rurales, nacieron con y de la mano de las mujeres. Pero faltó una parte, no sé si consideran lo mismo, que es incluir a las mujeres no solamente en estas declaraciones, sino también en otras cosas como, por ejemplo, incorporarlas a la tecnología. Si las mujeres hoy no están incorporadas a la tecnología, estamos hablando de mujeres rurales en mi caso, están excluidas del mundo. Y también me parece que es importante incluir a las mujeres en la educación, en el tema financiero, para que puedan exportar y para que puedan tener empresas. Porque si no, las mujeres después producen, pero no saben vender. Lo último que quería comentar es que me parece, y con respecto a lo que decía la señora de las cuotas, me parece que no estamos pidiendo nada obligatorio, sino que la mitad de la población tenga los mismos beneficios que la otra mitad.
Sí, pero si no es por cuota, no sucede.
Eso me parece que es lo que tendríamos que remarcar.
I'll gather two more questions and then feel free to answer. So I have disculpa, this sir first and then over there after. Yes.
Thank you. My name is Wengo Chan from the Conference Board Canada, Ottawa, based in Ottawa, Canada. First of all, thank all the panelists, the ladies, and the host for the impressive, interesting, and inspiring discussions. I have two questions. The first question comes primarily probably to the ministerial conference. You know, negotiations are going on, and they are making rules. My question here for the gender equality, women empowerment, do you think it's time to put a clause or provision in the WTO, in FTA, or any other trade agreements? For example, Canada and Chile have recently updated It's FTA between Canada and Chile. They include a chapter on gender equality. The same apply to Chile and Uruguay and FTA as well. So do you think WTO should make similar move into that direction? Then probably if you make that determination, probably have your voice heard, then ask the negotiator to consider that. That's the first question. The second question more related to practical issue to support women entrepreneurs in international trade. In particular, I heard from Susana say there's a lot of laws, regulations, or probably say to support women participation, gender equality, whatsoever. But it's more or less like a lip service. Nobody's serious. But can we really take some action to really support women business organization? For example, I'm doing trade-related technical assistance in many developing countries. For example, in South Asia. Then I was in Nepal, I was in Bhutan. The women business entrepreneurs expressed some concerns. They are so afraid to go through the customs because custom officials harassed them. They just find it difficult to do. But the question here, is it possible for the custom authority to establish a special channel, special lane, which the women will go through with a women officer in charge in the custom authority? So I'm just giving you an example to see whether it's better for women entrepreneurs. Although also the business organization headed by women, they probably understand women business much better than to support business women in international trade. So we need to probably take a specific action, encourage the governments around the world to really take these issues seriously.
Thank you. Martin, we take those two over there, and we close the first round of questions, the two of you.
Hola, muy buenos días. Mi nombre es Alicia Froman, yo vengo de Chile. Quería, contar dos cosas positivas, una, digamos, a un nivel nacional y otra multilateral. Irene Natividad mencionaba respecto de participantes en directorios de empresas y empresas públicas, una serie de países. Quiero también contar que en el caso de Chile, la presidenta Bachelet, cuando inició su gobierno, planteó como objetivo un 40% de mujeres en los directorios de las empresas públicas. De hecho, yo soy vicepresidenta de una empresa pública donde el 60% de los miembros del directorio son mujeres. Ahora, en un ámbito ya multilateral que nos interesa a todos, en pocas horas más se va a anunciar acá la declaración ministerial conjunta, suscrita ya por 115 países en relación al tema comercio y género en la OMC. Por lo tanto, tenemos los acuerdos de libre comercio que mencionaba el señor, Chile-Uruguay, Chile-Canadá, ahora también con la Unión Europea. Y están pasando cosas interesantes en el ámbito, sin duda, de comercio y género. Hay como un momentum, un impulso que tenemos que aprovechar todas. Gracias.
Bueno, buenos días. Un gusto enorme estar con ustedes aquí. Mi nombre es Luis Tarulo, periodista. Estoy colaborando aquí también con las tareas, con la organización Laura Muchnik, aquí en el trabajo diario. Simplemente quiero aclararles esto. En casa el cupo de mujeres está absolutamente superado, 66%, esposa e hija. Trabajé, así que absolutamente superado, cumplido. He trabajado en una agencia de noticias que recientemente ha cerrado, la agencia de noticias DIN, durante 32 años. Hace 32 años teníamos un directivo, un jefe que era misógino, que estaba en contra de la contratación de mujeres, así directamente lo decía, y terminamos nuestro ciclo de 35 años de existencia con una paridad de jefas de turno, secretarias de redacción, y no saqué la cuenta nunca porque nunca me interesó, pero creo que terminamos 50-50 mujeres y hombres, así que secretarias de redacción, o sea que chicas realmente muy valiosas y muy capaces que superaban a los hombres incluso en capacidad y en sensibilidad, como decían ustedes, con todos esos detalles que transmitían. Así que yo soy ultrafeminista y si no lo fuera no me queda otra. Perdón que haga este panorama para explicarles que no actúo con ningún prejuicio. Mi madre trabajó siempre entre hombres. Mi esposa es miembro de un directorio de una empresa constructora importante y mi hija, con apenas 20 años casi, ya está programando, tiene idea de poner su empresa de diseño de indumentaria, o sea que están en eso luchando. Simplemente es la pregunta, porque acá la idea es hacer una pregunta. Quería ponerlos en contexto de mi vida y por qué va la pregunta. Porque hay algo que me preocupa en todo esto de la brecha. De esta brecha y de la famosa grieta, palabra que usamos los argentinos en los últimos años, la cuestión de los extremos, los fundamentalismos, las posiciones radicalizadas, porque a veces también somos creadores de nuestros propios fantasmas, nuestros propios monstruos, y creo, opino y les pregunto a cualquiera de las que quiera contestar esta pregunta, si no conspira mucho también posiciones radicalizadas de confusas posiciones feministas, ¿no? Que a veces uno ve, incluso con manifestaciones radicalizadas, y eso si no conspira también contra la toma o la ganancia de posiciones de la mujer, ¿no es cierto?, en la opinión pública. Simplemente eso, algo que me preocupa.
Gracias.
No es responsabilidad de ustedes y de las posturas que sostienen ustedes, ¿no? Que es absolutamente racional, ¿no es cierto?
Gracias.
Pido disculpa al panel que voy a responder en español porque hablo mucho más fluido el español. En primer lugar, para responder la primera pregunta de la señora de la sociedad rural, está comprendido entre todos los objetivos del W20 el acceso a la educación, el acceso a las finanzas. Estamos hablando con el BID de proyectos de microfinanciamiento que van a ser canalizados a través del BID, o sea que son todos temas que los estamos contemplando y trabajando en ellos. La pregunta del señor era, y la cuota, te respondo algo importante. Yo también pensaba como vos que la cuota no era necesaria y de hecho la primera vez en la Cámara de Diputados yo voté en contra de la paridad de género y ahora voté a favor. ¿Por qué? Porque me doy cuenta que sin la cuota no está el acceso, o sea, está siempre el bloqueo. La cuota va a permitir el acceso hasta que cambiemos la cultura. Necesitamos hacer un cambio cultural y en una sociedad que es tan dominada por hombres, el cambio cultural solamente viene por la imposición y después va a ser una cosa común cuando nos ven permanentemente. Y terminando así... No, la señora de la sociedad rural. Por eso es un poco confuso todas las preguntas. Pero con respecto a tu pregunta, te digo lo siguiente. Yo no soy feminista, soy femenina. Lo mismo pasa con Andrea. Es claro que necesitamos una sociedad que es sustentable y la sociedad sustentable está compuesta por la familia, hombre, mujer, hijos. Está compuesta por el hombre y la mujer trabajando juntos, siempre trabajando en equipo. O sea, es imposible pensar una sociedad solo de mujeres o una sociedad solo de hombres. Es juntos que vamos a hacerlo. Y cuando nosotros hablamos de empoderamiento, ¿quién empodera a la mujer? El hombre. Entonces, las posiciones feministas, coincido contigo, que lo único que hacen es aumentar la grieta y aumentar las divisiones. Creo que esta es la mesa de diálogo, el W20, para juntar todas estas opiniones, escuchándolas a todas, feministas, no feministas, toda la diversidad de género que exista, escucharlos a todos y sacar conclusiones que nos hagan una sociedad más justa, más sustentable y, por supuesto, muchísimo más con más progreso.
Mona, you want to say something? Or...
Creo que el extremismo es condenable en cualquier agenda, en cualquier debate. La realidad es que el extremismo religioso, la campaña en contra de un tema climático, de cualquier manera que se exprese de manera irritante a través de la violencia, sin duda la forma invalida los contenidos y las formas. Y yo creo que en este tema en particular es de la manera y en particular, digamos, en el trabajo de este gobierno es a través de consensos donde se tratan de generar los cambios y llegar a las decisiones y a los caminos apropiados de trabajo conjunto. Así que eso me parece que es para todo. Después yo le repreguntaría a usted, si bien tiene la cuota del 66%, ¿quién tiene el trabajo en casa? ¿Cuál es el porcentaje de trabajo, digamos, de la tarea diaria en casa que realizan esas mujeres y usted? Para ver si estamos bien compensados. Así que esa se la dejo después para usted para que conteste. Y regarding the... Sí.
Perdón.
Sí.
Perdón, pero...
Ese es el porcentaje que tenemos que evaluar. Sí. Así. And the only short things regarding the address that the gentleman said, I think that what our colleague from Chile just said, the Buenos Aires Trade and Gender Declaration is going to be subscribed today at, I think, at 5 p.m. and Buenos Aires and Argentina and many of the countries we're adhering in, including in the international agreements, the gender and trade issues. And from your perspective on your side of analyzing where you have a special customs for women, I think we have to address the cultural barriers that we have and all of the ones regarding trade, at least, that are the ones that are affecting the possibility of women trading and maybe let that extreme, so that ideas as for an analysis in a second phase. I think we have to address the core first. It's not the same like quotas, which I do understand that are accelerators that we do need. I don't know whether a special gate for women is an accelerator at this point. Mm-hmm.
Irene?
Well, let me just close by saying we need to stop how we talk about women. We need to stop looking at women as needy and wanting and lacking and not having enough of something. Instead, we should talk about what women really have. We are nearing half of the workforce. Europe, Japan, Korea's economies will collapse if women do not enter the workforce and become leaders in that workforce. They have zero population growth, and the only place to turn are the women. In terms of entrepreneurship, as I said before, we're about a third, if not more, and growing. And you say, well, why is that important? Because small business is the foundation of every economy in the world. And as consumers, we're the majority of consumers. In my country, over 80%. What does that mean? What a woman decides to buy will determine the productivity of every company in the world. So we may not be at the top, but we form the base of every economy in the world, and that's the power that we have, and that's what we should talk about. We are not needy. We are going to make economies better.
Thank you, Irene. Mona, you're all set. Well, it's time to close. I would stay much longer, but we can't. Let me thank you, all of you. It's really, in my personal view, having this opportunity to moderate you all talented people with so many important messages to give us. And thank you all for being here. I hope this panel help you bring your ideas to your heart, and also to inspire you in terms of trying to eradicate all these asymmetries and gaps that we were talking about. Thank you very much.